Kia ora. G'day. How you going? See ya. All right, let's get ready. Sorry, this is only a 20-minute talk, so I've got to keep on track. So yeah, I'm here. I'll come to talk about Shiftlift testing with continuous collaboration. Let's get into it. So my name is Thom Toogood. Identify myself as a open source developer and / serial automator. I have a habit of just trying to automate everything. I'm a Kiwi originally from Auckland, born on the hill up there in Herne Bay, and I've been living in Melbourne for the last 6 years. So just have to give a quick shout out to Jody Hamilton, who's the CTO and co-founder of ZivTech, the company behind Probo, which is the product which we will be discussing today. So first of all, let's jump into it. So first concept I'd like to just introduce to you guys is a concept called Kaizen. Has anyone actually heard of Kaizen before? Yeah. So just to... It is, totally. So it's all about, it's like a manufacturing process improvement, and it's the concept of continuous improvement, essentially. So I worked at a manufacturing company here in New Zealand called Fisher & Paykel, and they were big believers in the Kaizen model, being manufacturers and making improvements around how they build their tools and things. So that crossed over into the IT world as well. So we made sure that anything we did in the IT team, we were constantly on the lookout for improvements. So it was like a daily, even weekly basis. We were constantly reflecting on what we were doing, trying to find ways we can improve our processes. So the good things about that, you get regular minor changes, so they're quite easy to track. And the whole idea behind Kaizen as well is that there's no top-down model. Anyone involved in the process should be able to provide feedback. So that's the starting point of Kaizen. So Kanban is another concept which is quite popular in web development these days. Has many people heard of Kanban before? Yeah. So things like Jira and things. So this is quite an important process around actually breaking up work and being able to assign tasks to people, as well as tracking, the completeness of tasks. So jump in there. So it allows you, visualize your process, and each task is essentially, a relay race in terms of being able to track it across certain stages. So that's just a really important part, is that the concept of left and right. Left is where your to-do list is, and then you sort of move these through stages to a complete state on the right. So it's an important process when I start talking about shifting left. So the next part is actually, it provides a way to identify process bottlenecks. So you're able to see the actual tasks moving through the process as if it was like a factory, essentially. So like a factory building things, and it's got a factory line. So it allows you to identify where the bits and pieces you can actually speed up, or where you're blocked, where you've got issues. So it's a really good process to follow at this stage. There's a great book called the Phoenix Project. I recommend it. It's kind of builds on the concept of DevOps and relates it back to the process of manufacturing. So the one thing that you really want to focus on with Kanban is making sure you minimize tickets, or the stories in that flow. Minimize the work in progress, and make sure that these tickets can flow as freely as possible from the very start to the finish. And the main reason for that is that you start sort of seeing a lot of rework and breakdown in processes and loss of efficiency when you've got things stuck in that process line, and that builds up and creates sort of a bigger problem than it should be. So the most important task in your Kanban board is the one on the far right, which is not done, essentially, and then it works backwards. So you really want to be able to break up these tasks and things in ways that you can make sure you actually deliver them to the very end. So this introduces the idea of shift-left testing, and that's the idea back to the Kanban board. Is that every project has testers. So I talk a lot about this with people who don't necessarily have testers on their team, but every project does have testers because essentially your users are your testers. If you don't have a specific person doing testing, so the only way your project wouldn't have a tester is if your project never has a user, and then there's no point really in the project. But so the traditional delivery pipeline focuses on getting work done from start to finish. You get your development all the way through this process, and then you sort of come back at the end and you try and test it all at once, and then that sort of sends some things back to the beginning of that process, and that's found to be quite a slow process and very inefficient. So the idea of shift-left testing is you try and move your testing or your validation steps to that left side of the board. So even very early on in that progress, you're progressing these tickets across, you can try and validate these as early as possible. So this is where certain tools that have come out, and there's things like Probo, and there's a few things that have been released recently from previous Next guys. Basically allows you to test your tickets as early as possible in a proper environment. So the benefits is basically you isolate the bugs sooner. You're testing the isolated change as well. So you're not having to deal with this bit's broken but this works, and then you're sort of juggling at that level. You're trying to actually identify and isolate the change itself, and then validate the change in itself. And unfortunately, it's just one of those things with Drupal projects is they're very prone to regression bugs, just because it's sort of a project's usually built on a whole bunch of other projects essentially, and when you're updating your base level platform, there's a high chance that you're going to introduce regressions. So automation, it's a bit of a buzzword, but with Kaizen, it basically it allows you to find these bottlenecks in that process, and you really want to try and automate some of these validation steps as much as possible. So this is where tools like CI and these QA type environments really help the process. So really important in testing and even development, local setups and ticket statuses and alerts and stuff. You try and make this as automated as possible, just so it can be as efficient as possible. So continuous collaboration is a concept coined by ZibTech. They've introduced this into the sort of CI, CD, and then they're calling it CC. And this is the idea that you're actually able to spin up these one-off environments for a little change, and you're able to send these off to non-technical stakeholders to actually help you with that validation process. So it means that you could actually find out that, is this what the client wanted before even something reaches the main branch of your project, which is really powerful, because you can find out very early if you need to make changes, and it doesn't affect anything else in your process. So I'll quickly just run through the current sort of process with what we see. Basically, like a lead dev assigns a ticket to a developer. Developer's like, yeah, I'll take that ticket. Dev thinks about the ticket, and he goes, oh yeah, I'm gonna fix it like this, codes it. Project manager comes along, oh, what's happening with that ticket? Dev promises, mate, it's definitely done. There's no chance, there's no chance this ticket's going back to me. It's complete. So the PM asks for a review. If there's no way to review this until this gets merged into the main branch, the lead has to come in that step and actually do the code review, check out the branch, make sure it sort of works, make sure it deploys all right. the lead obviously finds some problems. The dev, here's the grumbling. Yep, some grumbling. Thanks, this is Jody, by the way. So the PM fears the deadline because, that was yesterday anyway. Dev regrets the mistake they made. PM's like, oh, mate, it's probably going to be right now. Lead says it finally works. So the lead merges the fix or the ticket. But, the client hasn't even seen it yet. So that's the biggest issue that we face on a day-to-day basis, is that we're developing in these, in isolation essentially. We're assuming what we're doing is right in development teams, and hopefully the client's just going to say it's all good. But often the case, it's like, oh yeah, that's what I said, but I want some changes, just some little changes. But it was all merged. So so now we're going back to the process. We're going back to the left on the Kanban board. We're going, okay. So what do we have to do? We have to, we're actually wanting to take some things out of this merge that we just made, and we're like, we like this thing, we don't like that thing. So they're going to have to do some wrangling with Git cherry picks and whatnot. To be able to pull out certain areas and say, we'll deploy that. This one goes back to the left. So, this is where the automated QA sandboxes help so much and reduce so much of that pain. So you can basically spin up on a feature branch in isolation very quickly. Non-technical staff have access to that. They can validate that that's what they want. You can actually get the client involved to make sure that this is actually what they want. All before you get to a process where even a lead dev needs to actually look at the ticket. So this can all happen far left of that Kanban board, and you can get some really good feedback early on. It also really helps around just prototyping. So that's another just feature that you get out of the box with this. So you can automatically just branch off. Test out this new module on this project, and you can get a lot of value out of that. So so here's some cool Sandbox systems that are currently available. Top one's the new one from these guys down here, mates. I reckon you should check it out. It's pretty good. Platform.CI is a popular one as well. They provide sort of environment per branch. Pantheon Multi-Dev. Lagoon is another one, which if you're interested in that one, it's there's a BOF on it too. Tugboat is a product from Lullabot. Open Dev Shop's an open source tool for this. Probo.CI is another one, and you can actually build your own, which I did very early on, and realised it's not that fun. But it's good to work with sort of open source tools and collaborate with these things. So Probo.CI is the one we're discussing here. It's sort of a unique system in respects that in the way it works. It's all based on Docker, and so it'll spin up a Docker container, deploy your code, run the database, run your tests, and basically at the end of that process, it will shut down the container. And that means you're really only considering storage at that point. So you can have every single commit on every single branch building a new QA environment, and then it shuts it all down. And the idea is that each build has a link, and you can actually reference that commit that you made, and it'll relaunch the container, and you can see what the project is at that point in time. So so the new workflow is basically, lead assigns a ticket, slice before, devs jump in, devs think some code, nothing's changed here. Dev opens a pull request. Okay, so now there's an environment, so the project manager can actually check it straight away. The project manager sees, oh look, it's all good, and the client sees it. They're happy. That's great. So the lead checks it in and merges it into the project and deploys it. And projects run a lot smoother that way. There's a lot of relief across the team. They're all happy. Everyone's rejoicing. And yeah, so that's basically the story with QA environments. I don't know about time, but I do have 5 minutes. Okay, I do have like a slight example workflow I can quickly jump into and demo if I do have time. But yeah, I'll probably break into questions. So maybe I'll ask if there's any questions first, because I won't have much time. Any questions? Yep.
What was it for you in rolling your own?
Rolling your own, it's basically you're constantly having to move with changes. It requires a lot of just resource effort to do that, and things like PHP updates and this and that happens, and Drush 9 gets released if anyone's been through that pain. But all these sorts of things that are constantly moving, and you either just have to have the full-on resources to manage it yourself, or you collaborate with an open source project that you can all work together. So that was the major challenge. Yeah. Any more questions? No. All right. If I've got like a couple of minutes, I can quickly show you an example workflow. Go here. Just open. Forget that. All right, that's really small, and try and update that. And so yeah, it's a lot similar to a lot of other CI tools. I'll try and just get that a bit bigger. Resolution here is what's that? Yeah, I've done that. Oh, there you go. Get it. Yeah, so it's very similar to a lot of other CI tools where you just have a Probo.YAML file in the root of your project, and you basically step through how you build the project. So first step would be installing like a deploy key when we've got issues with privacy and trying to pull in things. Building your project, you basically import the database. Then we just have some basic run tests, and then we also use this for actual automated deployments. So as soon as we see a deployment on a feature branch, we'll on a non-feature branch, sorry, we'll actually run a deployment, and then a build on a develop branch will run a deployment to our dev environment, and a deployment to like the master branch will actually deploy it out to our alpha environment. So we also tie that in with the automation tools. Just showing one last thing. So we're heavily using composer scripts, which have been really nice because it allows you inside your composer projects to have these standard scripts. So a composer deploy will actually just run exactly the same locally on your project as it does in a CI environment. So often our CI environment can just reference these scripts, and it's the same. It can run exactly the same locally as it is in CI, or even in another environment. So yeah, it's really handy. So that's the Probo. That's the Probo there, and I think that's everything for Probo.